Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Marie Radford from Rutgers University. I welcome you here today to our panel, Recasting Call, Sculpting Services and Strategies for Cultivating Online Scholarly Identity. So our agenda for today, we're going to start with a report on scholarly identity research that myself and my team at Rutgers has been working on, including Lynn, who's here with us today, and some of my doc students and former students who are in the audience, Diane Flogel and Stephanie McKiddish, who helped us on this project. Then we're going to hear from Lisa, who's going to talk about how librarians support scholars at Illinois. We're going to hear from Kristen, who's going to talk about the digital presence initiative. And then Lynn is going to talk about personal online presence, and also the activity that we're going to be doing for the last 20 minutes of this panel is going to do with the visitor and resident mapping activity. Some of you may have already heard of this research. So we're going to first talk about how do we define scholarly identity for this panel today. Then we're going to do that research summary of findings, and we're going to talk about possible roles for academic libraries. And this work actually stemmed from a dissertation that Stephanie in the audience today did on the value of academic libraries for doctoral students. And one of her findings was that doctoral students needed help with crafting, maintaining a scholarly identity. So when we're talking about scholarly identity today, we're talking about researcher and scholars' efforts to build and promote a reputation, network, and research. Particularly today, we're talking about how this scholarly identity is constructed using digital tools and academic social networking sites. For example, the platforms we're talking about are ResearchGate, academia.edu, Google Scholar, Twitter, ORCID, and others. Now, how many of you are using one or more of these platforms in your own digital research activities? Okay. How many of you are currently helping faculty or advanced students, doctoral students, with their scholarly identity work? Okay, great. How many of you are satisfied with your use of all of these tools? Only Lisa. Good thing we have Lisa and Kristen on our panel. They're satisfied. The rest of us, I think, are a little confused. We're going to talk a little bit about this. We also have recognized a growing concern with metrics and alt metrics that are increasingly being used to measure our scholarly identity and our impact. We're increasingly, when we're going up for tenure or promotion, or we're looking for a new job perhaps, we're being asked to prove what is the impact of our work. So we have found that there were a couple of gaps after an extensive review of the literature. The gaps are in understanding, measuring the benefits as well as the drawbacks of using, because it's not all, rainbows in the scholarly identity world. And also, we have kind of a lack of understanding of what role might be appropriate for academic librarians to play in assisting scholars with their scholarly identity-related needs. So in our research review, I was talking about how we're trying to figure out how to define scholarly identity. We also have seen some literature that has information about what are the different functions of these platforms, such as ORCID, which will, help us to each create our own unique identifier so that we're disambiguated from people with the same name and so forth. We have found that these tools can be used for user engagement. There's considerable research on this. But however, those ethical considerations that I talked about a minute ago, we're going to talk more about that in our research, but these are keenly felt in the literature. Regarding potential library interventions, research has linked academic library services to scholarly identity-related assistance. That's been conducted by David Ward, also at the University of Illinois. Because many scholars may still lack strategies for crafting online scholarly identities, libraries can provide services to support, orient, and educate users. Beyond offering services, academic librarians engage with scholarly identity for your own purposes, right? Your own, shameless self-promotion, as sometimes I say, about my work and trying to promote what it is that I'm doing. Beyond, faculty members and doctoral students, they may use a variety of these digital tools to promote their research and work. This research, I just want to mention it briefly because we don't have a lot of time to talk about it, but we do have a theoretical framework for our research. It comes from the great sociologist Irving Goffman, who talked about how we work to manage people's impressions of us. He died in 1982, so he didn't imagine, Twitter and all this. But interestingly, his work on face work and face threats really translates very well into the virtual realm. We had 5 research questions driving this work. I don't know if you can read this. Can you read from in the back row? It's a little bit small for a room of this size. All of our slides, as Kristen had announced, are available on the conference website, so that if you want to refer later, this is also being recorded if people care to hear this again sometime. But you can kind of read those research questions for yourself. But really what we were interested in is what kind of role could academic libraries take in supporting this work? How do scholars engage with scholarly identity work? And what are their information needs? The research that we did is extremely exploratory. We were just starting to try to figure out what we needed to know in order to do a bigger, larger phase of this work. So what we did, we took 30 semi-structured interviews. 10 of them were with PhD students and 10 faculty. Those students and faculty are social scientists in communication discipline. We also interviewed 10 academic librarians, and they were recruited through listservs. We analyzed the data through qualitative coding using the constant comparisons methods. We used both some codes from Goffman that I mentioned before, and also saw what codes did arise from the data. We developed an initial typology. We used in vivo software, and we had 4 coders who achieved a very high intercoder reliability through repeated discussions of our findings. To move to findings, we found that our 30 interviews were predominantly white and female, and about half were 26 to 34 years of age. Our librarian sample had a little bit more age diversity in it. When we were asked our participants which social networking site and platforms they used for SI work, the top 3 were Twitter, Facebook, and ResearchGate. Although Instagram, academia.edu, and ORCID also had, at least 50% and higher of the participants. It sort of surprised us a little that Twitter was a predominantly used. I thought we might find ResearchGate or academia.edu, but looking at the literature, this has also been found by other researchers. So Twitter is probably going to have a big role in our next phase of our research for shades and foreshadowing of coming events. For our major themes, we were looking at benefits and drawbacks of scholarly identity work, and also the library service roles. So some of the themes that emerged: the good benefits of scholarly identity work. Connecting with other researchers was the top theme. Disseminating academic activities, and then sharing and exchanging materials with other researchers were all above the 2/3 mark, and also facilitating tenure and promotion, about 11% said that. To illustrate, one PhD student said, I can connect with people who share similar research interests with me through those academic websites. I can see their research interests and papers. Whenever I use those online tools, it gives me feelings like I'm part of those people and makes me feel like I belong. And so that's sort of that idea of engagement, right? Moving on to think about what were some of the drawbacks that we uncovered. Time constraints. Remember, I was saying that these involving, if you're going to be involved in any kind of social media use, you know that you have to dedicate some time to it, right? And the more different types of social media you use, the more time that it takes. The concern with for-profit business models was another that came up as another drawback. I'm going to talk more about that in a minute. Context collapse, because, say, if we're on Facebook, we might have our colleagues, we might have our friends, we might have our family. We have all these different contexts, so it's really hard to know what it is that we're going to be able to talk about, right? Confusion was another top concern. So one librarian said, this landscape is now so crowded that it's difficult to choose, select, and create a consistent and comprehensive identity. They're all over the place, those identifiers. There are many different data and silos, and it's difficult to combine them in one place and draw some conclusion. Ethical considerations that we came up with, we talked about the for-profit models, commodifying people via branding, privilege and power dynamics, also come into play. Copyright peril, do you have copyright for things that you're uploading, and so forth. We also found that data capture, they're capturing our data and they're capturing our labor. So for profit models, one of the things that came out is that ResearchGate and academia.edu, despite the .edu, it is a for-profit model, but as this participant said, so are Twitter and Facebook, and what people use them sort of with great abandon and don't think about these things. Library services that are currently offered include workshops, orientations to the landscape, providing information on particular tools, and helping with packaging content. The workshops primarily focus on deciding where to publish, avoiding predatory publishers, and how to use the metrics and alt metrics and social media. On desired assistant, when we asked the PhD students, we didn't have a lot of feedback here, but few of them wanted individual consultations. Some wanted to have that orientation session to the landscape, and one person wanted to know how to create a personal website. So this PhD student said that they really wish that they had known about these and had a little more training earlier in their academic career, so that's something to think about. Faculty wanted to get more information on copyright, on open access education, and on the tools themselves. Skip that. So in conclusion, I mentioned that we already are thinking of one of the things that we might be doing is using hashtags, if you're hashtagging here at this conference, to look at how people are actually enacting face work and building their scholarly reputation through social media. We're going to also look to try to identify key practices, further identify barriers, develop materials which will help people, especially if you're going to be conducting workshops, and further exploring what else can academic libraries do to support faculty, doctoral students, and one another. So I'd like to now turn it over to Lisa Hinchcliffe. Lisa is going to talk about librarians supporting scholars.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us here today. And I have had the privilege at the University of Illinois for a number of years presenting a workshop that we call Curating Your Online Scholarly Identity. I've had a number of people come to that workshop. It's an open workshop over the years. And particularly what's interesting to me is how many different kinds of people who have come to that workshop. Everyone from undergraduates to a faculty member who is about to retire. And every one of them come with a different need in this setting, but all of them very much trying to figure this out. I think if you know me, and I see looking out in the room, many of you do, I am a person who's very active in social media, but I also have profiles on pretty much every system that exists because of this workshop that I teach. So the main thing we talk about in our workshop is that you have a choice to make. Your choice, though, isn't about whether you have an online identity or not. The choice you have to make is whether you have a managed or unmanaged online identity. Now, I think there's a real issue here, right? This is imposed labor on us. So we either do the work to curate these identities or these presences, or we are curated, and sometimes not how we'd like. And this is a particular issue, I think, as we think about the two keynote speakers we've had at this conference today. This is something we actually end up talking a lot about in these workshops, because I come to these workshops as a cis, hetero, white, middle class, very successful in my profession woman. And we have to talk about what this is going to be like if you are maybe not in those categories, and how your online identity and the way you are curated, if you don't curate yourself, might also become some of an issue. So even though these workshops are technically about technology, we spend almost all our time talking about self-representation and who you want to be online, and how do you be defined by yourself rather than by other people. So we talk a lot about this concept of digital footprint. What is your footprint online? And your digital shadow. Your footprint is where you put your foot down. Your shadow is the things other people are casting by kind of putting light on you. And this isn't always exactly the way we would want to be portrayed. Alternatively, some people have the problem that they actually cannot have an online identity unless they aggressively make it. Because if your name is Mark Smith or Lisa Johnson, there's hundreds and thousands of you, right? So you might even think with Lisa Hinchliff, that's like a pretty unique name. It turns out there's 3 of us who publish. There's a lawyer, a librarian, and a chemist. It sounds like a joke. It's not. I have to continuously tell Google Scholar that I do not publish these chemistry articles. I can't even tell you what they're about, honestly, because I can't even understand the titles. I'm sure I am not publishing them. So these are the kinds of questions I think as librarians we can help scholars think about. What is your goal of your online presence? What do you have time to manage? And then which scholarly communication and collaboration networks might be best for you? Because as much as we might think about ResearchGate and et cetera, there's actually quite a few of them out there. And one thing at the University of Illinois, many of the people coming to my workshops are international students and scholars. They are returning to their home countries. So we go look at this list to find out what is the scholarly communication network in their country, particularly if their country's dominant language is not English. So we need to find the Portuguese scholarly communication network if you're going to be in a Portuguese country. So we have to really think about some of these issues. So I have a checklist of what a scholar needs. This is all the information you need to gather up if you are going to actually make a concentrated effort at managing your online scholarly identity. You need all the names that you've ever published under or are known as. This turns out to be a much longer list for most people than they think because your name's been abbreviated. Sometimes people left out your middle name, even though you tend to use it. There's all kinds of things that happen to our names. Just our names. Okay. Your identifier numbers. So if people don't have it, we talk about getting an ORCID. We talk about how do you find the numbers that other people assign to you, like Scopus and Web of Science have given you a number, whether you wanted it or not. In my case, Scopus had given me 3 different numbers because I had 3 different versions of my name. So I even got to do the work of cleaning up their database. They did not send me a coupon or anything. You need a digital photo or representational image. I highly recommend people use the same one because visually your visual of you is going to be your brand. And so thinking about what you want that to be. And boy, if you change your haircut, women especially. But this is a real issue for us, right? Of a representational image because people are going to really key in on that visual even more than our name. Email address that you check often. It's kind of a hard one sometimes. A personal website if you have one. I tell them they should make a list of all their publications and presentations with DOIs and have it formatted and as a RIS file. This gives us all kinds of chance to talk about things that half of you in the room hopefully at least knew what was, right? Like publications with DOIs. What are DOIs? We've talked about ORCIDs. Now we talk about DOIs. An RIS file. Of course, this is the output format from EndNote, ProSite, Reference Manager, Mendeley. So it's a chance to talk about where are you even keeping track of everything you publish? Right? And then do you have copies of your publications? And do you have the copyright to share them? And this, you can see how many different things we get to talk about just by this checklist alone. Going through this checklist usually takes us just to even understand everything on it quite a bit of time. All the time during my workshop, I'm actually showing examples of these different systems. And we look at, well, where is that ORCID number and how does it use the researcher ID and the like? So here's my bottom line advice for the career stages, the takeaway. And one of the things that's tricky about curating your online scholarly identity is different platforms sort of let you start to engage at different stages. So everyone, like right now, if you don't have an ORCID, you could get one, okay? You can actually make an ORCID for other people as long as you have a unique email address to register it with. I'm not advising that you do that, but like for those of us who help scholars out who maybe, like if you have their email address, you can set it up for them and then send it to them, etc. You need to make a conscious decision about ResearchGate and academia.edu. They are going to profile you. So do you want to manage those profiles or not? It's a choice. You can have a ResearchGate and an academia.edu if you have an edu email address. And both of those platforms will also let you have one if you work in the science and research community, but you just have to prove yourself a little bit more. So you need to decide, do I set this up? Coming next year, I have 2 grad students working with me right now. We are finding that a lot of people set up ResearchGate profiles before they ever have any publications. And we are interviewing them to ask them why. Like, why are you doing this? Because it's strong that they're doing it. It's not like a random, like, it's clear that there's a pattern. So stay tuned. After you publish something, so you must have your name on a publication. You can claim your Google Scholar profile. Now, you might have to convince Google Scholar to first index the thing that you published, but then you can claim it and create a profile. And you can also register with Microsoft Academic, which is their competing product to Google Scholar. And you can also manage your profile within Microsoft Academic. If you edit a book, and this is edit or author a book, and this is something I find many people do not realize at all, you can claim your Amazon author profile. And you can do a little bit of management, like you can put up an author photo, you can put your contact information, you can stream your tweets to your Amazon author profile. You have to make a decision about whether you want to do that or not. This is not if you wrote a book chapter. You have to actually be the book author or the book editor, but you can set up that Amazon Author Central profile as well. So these are the kinds of things that I'm doing in this workshop, teaching about these and encouraging people to make strategic decisions about what are they going to choose to manage. And then we also work through a little bit of a workflow of like, okay, so now you've decided to manage it. So next time you publish something, what are you going to do? In what order? How? And in my short period of time, that's it for me. So I'm going to turn it over to Kristen to hear a little bit more about the Public Scholarship Initiative.
All right, so I'm going to talk about an initiative that is at Michigan State University called the Digital Presence and Public Scholarship Initiative, which we shorten to DPPSI, which is so helpful for everyone. This initiative is based out of the College of Arts and Letters, but it is not exclusive to that unit. I am based in the College of Arts and Letters, although I have an MLIS, and this was my advisor right here. And this initiative grew from our dean, Chris Long, and in order to promote and support efforts by faculty and graduate students in our college, but also beyond, to critically think about, create, and maintain a robust digital presence that amplifies and enriches their scholarship and enables them to engage the broader public. So that's kind of this centralizing mission of our initiative. So at its core, this initiative is about reclaiming agency over your own digital presence and telling your story and the story of your work to a public audience. So in some ways, very similar to what Lisa was talking about, but we're sort of orienting around thinking about having your own website as a centralizing feature in doing that, and then connecting that website out to other spaces like the ones that Lisa was talking about. So as I mentioned, this comes and is kind of centralized in some ways from the College of Arts and Letters. It's sort of a grassroots initiative that's grown up at Michigan State over the past 3 or 4 years. But we partner with a lot of units around campus. So some of those units are academic units like the College of Natural Science and the College of Education. Some of those units are central support units like the libraries, and in some sense central IT, although that's its own story that I'm not going to get into today. But we also work with university outreach and engagement and communication and brand strategies in our faculty development office. So some of the units that work for the whole campus in terms of thinking about communicating and engaging beyond the academy. So you can find out more about this initiative at msu.domains, and it centers around basically a domain of one's own initiative, although it is not exclusive to that. So on this website, it's also the login portal for our domain of one's own initiative, but it also has support documentation, both about how to use basic WordPress things, but also how to use those with Reclaim, and provides a calendar of activities and support opportunities, as well as we started a monthly newsletter this semester. So we've been able to use and starting to grow this space to communicate more about the initiative. So you can see some of our support documentation and fellowship opportunities. So one of the key things that I just want to point out is while this kind of grew out of let's have a domain of one's own initiative, it's really more about getting faculty and students and librarians to think consciously about how they're cultivating their online presence and what their capacities are, what their priorities are, what their time availability is, and what their interest level is in doing so. So there's more than just setting up a domain of one's own for everyone, but we also discuss things like setting up a WordPress site and a profile through Humanities Commons. We're actually at Michigan State, we're working with Humanities Commons to spin off an installation of it called MSU Commons that will hopefully start within the next 6 months or so, which will provide a space that's not specific to humanities, but that will be open to everyone at MSU to set up a profile there. I could talk about Humanities Commons at another time, but it also allows you to spin up a WordPress website without needing to worry about what is a server or the possibility of, especially if you're a student, leaving the institution and then needing to take over the costs of that server. Which when you work with domain of one's own, which is this run by Reclaim Hosting, that cost is $30 a year. So it's something that we can feel good about, and because it's not very expensive, and also I can endorse the company. They get academics basically, and have very good customer service. So we can send people there with a pretty good conscience. But the main thing is getting people to think through what's really going to work for them, and then they get to make that choice. And it might evolve over time, and that's perfectly fine too. So the initiative has a variety of things that we do within it, and spanning from some of those tip sheets or documentation guides that you could see on the website to consulting drop-in sessions and individualized appointments to an 8-week-long fellowship program, which we offer every semester, and we've now offered for 3 years every semester. The fellowship program meets once a week, and we have for an hour during lunchtime. There isn't any financial remuneration for doing so, but we've had between 10 and 20 faculty, librarians, and graduate students in the fellowship program every semester since we started, and I'm going to talk about that program for a minute. All right, so the curriculum for this 8-week-long program, it started off maybe a little longer, and we morphed into 8 weeks because it fits within a semester without getting into finals time. So the first week, we do some introductory stuff and get people to think about what their goals are during the 8-week period. And we also do this visitor and resident mapping activity that you'll see that we're going to do today, and just get a discussion going because we're bringing people together from a variety of colleges. It's not just people in arts and letters, but it's a nice way to get people to meet each other from across the institution, and we have a very decentralized institution. In the week 2, we do some basic WordPress intro. Some people are more familiar than others. And we also help them think about how they want to structure their website. So thinking about some of the information architecture and really framing that through, what do you want that top level menu to be on your website? And getting people to think about that. Then in the 3rd week, we don't have a schedule, we just have co-work. In the 4th week, we think about connecting that website that people are just starting to make with other spaces. So if you're engaging on Twitter, how do you connect your website with Twitter, cross-linking, et cetera, thinking about ORCID, also thinking about claiming your Google Scholar identity. A lot of this is discussion-based. We're not teaching people through tutorials how to do all these things in 1 hour. But it also opens up a conversation about workflow and how do we make it so that this isn't an extraordinary amount of additional work, but how do you integrate some of this digital presence stuff into the work that you're already doing? And that's why we include if this, then that. Then in week 5, we return to a concept which we've sort of been introducing throughout, which is audience. Everyone is going to have a different goal for their website. We're not saying you need to do this or that thing in this or that way, but really it's thinking about what do people want and who is the audience. For some of our post-tenure faculty, the audience might be policymakers. For some of our graduate students, it might be future higher universities looking to hire them. We also talk about feedback and analytics. And then in week 6, we have another co-work. Week 7, we introduce the concept of Creative Commons, both for assigning a Creative Commons to your website, but also how to search the commons for images, and through that, talk a little bit about accessibility in your website. And then the last week is a little bit of a sum up, a little bit of co-work time, and also getting people set up with their own domain name. Here's a picture of a year's worth of cohorts. We had a fun party at the end. And then I'm not going to go through these, but they're linked on the slides. Here's just a couple of faculty websites. I simply wanted to point out that we don't tell people they need to do anything MSU branded, although we provide them with an MSU branded accessible theme for WordPress to work from, but then people are welcome to do whatever they like. So in terms of some lessons learned and next steps for us, one of the things is really just the lesson learned is to focus not on the technical things, but to focus on the content of what digital presence might mean for an individual, and that it varies, and the relationships that we can build through our fellows program, but also through some of those incidental things, and really more about the why of this, and really getting into some of the maybe why not sometimes. And the second lesson learned is that collaboration is essential. Nobody involved in this, except for our fabulous student worker, has this as their primary job. So we all have to kind of lift the load together. And then in terms of next steps, one of the next things is continuing to develop our website to share and make explicit the work that we've been doing. And then scaling up. There's interest at the university level to try and extend this to undergraduates, which is great, but I don't really know who's going to do that because that goes way beyond our capacities right now. So when we're thinking about this, we're thinking about some of the things that Lisa's thinking about, and we're also thinking, how can the libraries be more involved? So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Lynn.
Thank you. I get the fun part. I get to talk about an activity and also give you some background on this activity. And we have been using this for quite a while. Have any of you ever heard of the Visitors and Residents Project? Some of you have. Well, let me inform you. This project started in 2010 with one of my colleagues at Oxford University, David White. And David started talking to us about how individuals have a presence online where they're either visitors or residents. And a visitor is not, it's not about the amount of time you spend online, it's your presence online. And so a visitor is someone who uses these tools, these online tools, and uses them when he or she needs them. And so it's dependent on that context and situation. And so, right, sitting in this room, some of you may be tweeting and tweeting on your phone. When you're in your office, you may be on Facebook, which I'm told by my nieces and nephews are for old people, but you may be in your office using your laptop and on Facebook. You may be with, like if I'm with my nieces, I'm using Snapchat on my phone. And so I wouldn't say that I was a resident, someone who has a presence in Snapchat. I would say I probably have more of a presence on Facebook because I'm older, I guess. But it's more comfortable. That's where the people I know are hanging out. And so we came up with this map, and Dave was in the educational technology department at Oxford University. And so we started doing this. We never mentioned libraries, librarians. We started working with this model in teaching and learning. And so we asked individuals to think about where they spend their time online. And if they're a visitor or a resident, and what they're doing in their personal or academic, we called it institutional lives. We have a lot of work on this, and we interviewed secondary school students in the U.S. and U.K. and went through first and second year undergraduates, upper level undergraduates, postgraduate, graduate students, and then scholars and lifelong learners. So we have interviews to support this, and then we've done this mapping all over the world. And so I'm going to show you some examples. We also have an app. So when we do the exercise today, if you'd rather do the app on your phone or your tablet or laptop, you're more than welcome to. And this is quite easy to use. And some people like the app. Others like to feel, they like to draw, they like to color. And so they'd rather have this more tactile for them. So that's up to you. And I'm going to share some maps with you today to give you an idea of what we've learned and how you can use these in helping others develop their online presence. So this was a map from a UCLA doctoral student. And the first thing she said to us when she talked about this was, she said, "I'm very surprised that I remembered every single icon and I never had to look them up." And she said, "This is telling me something." And I said, "What have you learned?" And she said, "I'm spending way too much time on social media and not enough time on my dissertation work." I also noticed that she did not include the library website, any library sources, and she said, "Oh, I never thought of those." That says something in itself. Then she started talking more and said, I think it's because I access everything through Google Scholar and I don't think about the library in that way. This is another UCLA graduate student, and she said that she used the library website for discovering the sources that she needed. But then she started talking about how the library website was not optimized for a smartphone, and she did not want to carry her laptop with her on campus. And so she said, I go into the library and I look up what I need, and then I have to take a picture of the monitor, of the screen. And then I have to you're nodding your head. You do that too? No, I'm teasing. And she said, and then I have to email that to myself. Well, I couldn't say anything because that's not my place as a researcher, an interviewer. And so one of the other doctoral students said, oh, I think I can tell you how to do that, and explained to her how she could get what she found and email it to herself directly from that discovery tool, that library discovery system. Well, what that told me was that this was not intuitive at all for this individual. Now, what does intuitive mean? And we won't go there. But it was not understandable to this individual. So when we went back and talked to the UCLA library staff and explained this, they said, oh, wow, we need to do something different on our website to let people know what they can do. We also need to make that our smartphone interoperability much easier for them. This is Hong Kong University Graduate School. And you can see on the, and these are the words of this graduate student. He said on the school side, so that institutional side, he very much wants that person-to-person, face-to-face contact. And that was very deliberate. He says he uses Facebook a lot for social, Gmail for personal emails, Twitter and Google+, but he said not many of the people he associates with are there right now. So a lot of this is also dependent upon your social networks. So that's something else we can learn. He uses Google Scholar both for school and for work. And he mentioned different things for reminders, calendars, online, other online services like that. This is a Hong Kong University teaching staff. And this individual said he spends most of his time in teaching using Moodle, online apps that he uses for teaching. He said that he did not like Moodle. It wasn't a platform that the students liked. It wasn't engaging. He talked about Google Drive for teaching and learning. And I asked why he had hearts on some things. And he said, that means I like those apps. So anything with the heart means that he liked it. So you'll see the App Store, Facebook. This is a Hong Kong University faculty researcher. And he said that he prefers, for his work, he prefers PDFs. We have been doing some studies on discovery and access and fulfillment, and we have learned that one of the things that individuals like are PDFs. So this is not, you're all nodding your heads. It's not unusual. Why? It's portable. You download it, it's portable. It's something we know. This faculty member said the library website is awful, okay? He says it's not good. You have to go through all kinds of authentications. There are large lists of databases and journals. He said, I don't understand it. I don't know how to get what I need. He said that he really is a visitor for everything, and he uses LinkedIn for his work. This is a librarian at the University of Pittsburgh. And the librarian said that she uses Google and Facebook as a resident, and you can see that. And she said that she uses LibGuides a lot. And we heard today that in one of our sessions that a librarian said, you're smiling because you said it was heresy, that LibGuides are really just not good. And so this librarian spends a lot of her time with LibGuides. So we're gonna put it back on you and make you do some work here. So you may go to this link and use the app if you prefer. Kristen has passed out the sheets. And we also have definitions on the sheet so that you can, if you forget what a visitor is, what a resident is, you have that information. We have colored pencils. Think about not just your academic life, but your personal life. There are things like online bill paying, online banking, online shopping. There are many things that we do, and we're often surprised at the activities and the time we spend online. And then if you're willing to share, we'll have some time at the end to talk about this and what you've learned. If you're willing to share that information with us, if we can get into our account, we can display it up here and you can talk about it and tell us what your experience was. Now, Kristen has been using this in your sessions and helping, I guess, you as well as the academics learn what and better understand their online presence. This is very good. I found it very good for me to do. To learn about what I'm doing, where my online presence lies. I was listening to some of the things that Lisa said, and I'm doing everything wrong. And so I know I have to regroup. But if you will do that and see how this works, if you want to use the app, it's at the top. The papers, and you can email those to us.